You're watching Hello Nation.
Well, we want to welcome you to our Hello Nation podcast. We're so glad you found us. We are the voices of good news. We love sharing good news and we love educating you on all things. So today we're talking about paving contractors, and we have our Better Business Bureau of Upstate New York expert, Warren Clark, joining us. And thank you, Warren.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, you're a regular now. So we want, as you know, we start each podcast with good news. Any good news. It doesn't have to be related to paving in the topic we're talking about. So give us some good news.
Well, the really good news is that I did have a weekend with my kids and grandkids. I actually have a good news story about paving
All
as
right.
soon as we get started. So everything generally good. Thanks.
Great. Well, let's start with that good news paving story.
We have a 7,000 plus foot building with 36 car parking lot, and that has to be kept up every couple of years. And somehow over this past winter, we'd actually developed a pothole at the beginning of our lot as you come off the street. They did drone. Instead of coming and walking the parking lot,
Wow.
they sent a drone, we also, some of the things that we'll talk about and what to look for, we made sure that in our contract that they were going to fill the pothole because all the last several years have just been sealing and restriping the lot. So it was interesting. The process was more interesting this year.
So let's get right to this then. Obviously, things are changing because of technology. So if they send a drone to assess the parking lot, I'm imagining they also have people on the ground looking, right?
Well, I didn't see anybody. Nobody
Wow.
came in and said, hi, we're here from XYZ paving company. We use only accredited businesses, obviously, and we had sent a note out to those in the area, and suddenly the quotes appeared. So we had to make sure that they caught the hole. That was interesting because the day after they did it, we had a torrential rainstorm, and the hole would have been filled with water, and there was water there. So we actually had to wait a day to see if they'd actually gotten. I knew they would have done it. We had talked about it, but. It was, again, I was a more involved consumer for this segment than for some of the others.
That's great, because now we're going to learn from you. So talk us through the process. What did you do first? Because obviously you've been with the Better Business Bureau for decades, so you know the right way to go about hiring someone who should be able to get the job done and get it done right. So first step one for our listeners, what do they do if they're looking for paving
Well, get a
contract?
quote. We encourage people to get at least 3 quotes, and for us, it's a little complicated because we probably have 5 or 10 accredited members, and we just took the geography, those that were close enough, and we sent out a request for proposal, and the average consumer, even the average business owner, doesn't have to send 5 or 10. But interestingly, also, we know that by using accredited members out of our database, that we're going to get a response. That one of the issues, believe it or not, is you ask people to come for a quote and they don't even show up, and that happens. It happens to consumers. It happens to businesses, and it happens to the Better Business Bureau, believe it or not.
So it does, huh? So how many quotes did you have in front of you to compare?
I think we got 3 and then decided that within those that we were okay. So, we if we weren't sure, we would have expanded it a little further. One of the issues we have frankly, is that we always use accredited members, uh, but things, certain types of our services, we have many members that could do it, and if we put out a real broad request for a proposal, we choose one and have 20 mad at us. Even if we chose by price, or we chose by some of the other things that, frankly, you and I are going to talk about today.
Right. So, what are some of the most common complaints that you get at the Better Business Bureau about paving contractors?
Well, the first is the no-show, believe it or not, and we actually have a category internally within our lingo. We call them gypsies, and there are people that travel around and probably don't have an actual address. They're just looking. They look for what they think is rough, or they look at, they'll see an old person out mowing the lawn, and so the issue, a big issue, is to make sure that it's actually a company that can show up to do the work. And of course, we would recommend people checking with us. We have many all over upstate New York, so it's not just here in Amherst where our headquarters building is, but we have people, I'm sure, that can service almost every lot in upstate New York.
And based on what you've seen over the years, what are some of the misunderstandings that consumers have about paving work?
Well, I think in almost any kind of renovation or a home improvement or lot improvement, is people really understanding what they need, and understanding what they're going to get, and I think that goes for pretty much everything, and it's a big deal with paving. Some of the issues, that the complaints that we get would be things like pooling. It's not a perfect flat. They're not out there with levels. They're doing the very best they can, but you've got undercoatings that are settling. Even the hole that we had filled is not perfectly level with the rest of our driveway. We didn't redo the whole driveway. We filled a hole. And for anybody that's driven anywhere in upstate New York after a winter, the potholes, are not necessarily filled exactly so that it doesn't appear that was ever there. Is maybe the best way to put it. So the expectation has to be that it's a repair, it's not a replacement. I think that my hope, and we probably don't do what other businesses or people should, is to show me pictures. You're going to fix the hole in my driveway. What is it likely to look like when we're done? And that was something, I try to do a fair amount of prep work for each of the sessions, because I'm wearing a suit and tie. I'm not out doing the work, or even in our case here, I have my office manager who manages the processes, and it's really important that both sides know that the contractor knows what you're looking for.
Mhm.
Can they do it? Do they want to do it? And then also that they explain to you exactly what it's going to be. The other thing, a huge thing, my next door neighbor had a driveway done, and when it was done, there was some cracking, and we actually handled his complaint against the vendor, and we have an expert that we would call, that's not involved, to go look at it. And the truth is, the expert said that was normal cracking, and it's not pristine. And again, that it probably would be better if the vendors were willing to show what it's likely to look like. They don't want to do that because it doesn't look like absolutely flawless.
And there's a lot of things to consider. I know because we've done driveways before, and if you had me make the decisions, I would make all the wrong decisions because I wouldn't ask all the detailed questions that I'm supposed to. But we did. We had a big like crater in our driveway, and they kept filling it, and it needed to be totally redone in order to fix the problem. But we didn't find that out until years later from other contractors. So what kind of questions should listeners be asking when they're hiring a paving contractor? You mentioned, pooling, like there's a way that it's got to drain, like all these things that it just takes patience and understanding to hire the right person.
Well, we
Right.
do, and the snowplow, the snowplow didn't probably the blade didn't create the pothole. I wouldn't think, because it wasn't a slash, it was a hole. And I'm guessing that something underneath the driveway must have settled, or
Yes.
just you hear these sinkholes that bury houses, that one day it's flat and the next day it's not. So I think that the most important question, Leah, is the scope of work that the property owner, and we'll say that rather than homeowner or business owner, because the property owner or the people that are contracting need to know what they think they want, and then they have to understand from the contractor what they're going to get. And I think, again, the expectations that often are wrong, on both sides. That the contractor will think, we've been told that our parking lot, our building is now 17 years old, and we've been told that we should be doing sealing and restriping. And obviously, we want that every 2 or 3 years, and that at some point it's going to need to be redone. That it's not going to be pristine after everyone. We're thrilled with what we have. The job was beautiful, again, my understanding, I didn't know what the pothole, well, I call it the pothole, was going to look like until I got to work Monday morning, and found it was blacktop, which is what we have. It was flat. It was nice, but we couldn't tell because there was a little dip there. And again, it had rained. We didn't really know, and I wasn't going to drive through it to see, if it was still, if they'd missed it for some reason.
And this was just done too. So, right, you obviously are going to keep an eye on it and see if they covered it.
Yeah,
Right.
very much. I know where we drive on roads. They do some of these fill areas, and so you see
We'll be
stones
right back up.
around them that it's coming out. Now, our driveway, um, with technology, what it is, we don't get a lot of visitors, but we have variety of people coming to work every day and coming and going, and vendors, UPS, Amazon, FedEx, all of the various deliveries, um, and it's probably something we do need to watch, and it won't be the fault. The job, to my current expectation, is done very well.
So, should we be asking for a contract that includes some sort of a warranty, especially when there are issues like that that I'm imagining you pay extra to repair, right?
Well, yeah, I'm sure we did. I don't think it was a ton, because it was a smallish hole. I've described it as a large. I loved your word crater. That's what it felt like as you were trying to drive in every day. Um, but in some cases, ours, they may not be willing to give a warranty because at some point it's going to need to be redone. And I don't know, these are actually people that we've had now, I think, every couple of years for 10 years. We trust them. They're a 40-year member of the bureau. They have, um, if any, very limited complaints. I'm not sure that they have any, even, again, because my office manager went through that. But we know that if they had complaints, they fixed them. So, that without a question. So I think it's, um, the again, expectations is probably a real important word.
Okay. And, you know, unfortunately, we live in a world where everybody just wants to make a quick buck. So there are a lot of scams out there. When it comes to paving, what kind of scams do you see?
Well, the no-show is huge. That's where somebody comes by. I think we talked about this in a different context. Maybe it was roofers. Somebody comes by and says, "I see you need work. I'm nearby. I can come over. Give me, $300. Give me $500 for materials." And you never see them again. So that's probably from the right up front the biggest issue is someone um, believing that they need work that they may not need, or knowing they need work, but hiring somebody that comes by, says they can do it reasonably, it makes sense to that person, and they hand them cash.
So the lesson here is what? Don't hand them cash until you have an actual contract or you
Well, absolutely.
fully vet them,
The
right?
and I use the word cash intentionally, because don't pay in cash. That you have no recourse if you've handed somebody cash. A check, you got 24 hours. If they literally took off that day, you could stop payment. But a credit card is what we recommend. I honestly, because I'm 100 years old, I use Venmo and some of the other apps, because people that I deal with will say that's what I have, and so I'm set up. But I'm not sure. I don't think there's any guarantees with those services. I don't know how they could. They're getting a couple of percent for handling the transaction. So
Right,
I
there's so
I
many
would
ways to
say,
pay now. Zelle,
yeah.
Venmo, but you still recommend what? Paying by
I
with
I would say use a credit card if you can. Sometimes they'll charge a little extra for it, but unless you really know them, the company we have now sends us a bill, and it's when we have to do the whole driveway, we may have the third that we've talked about in some other contexts as well.
if you know it's a solid contractor, you trust them, they come fully vetted, perhaps you could consider cash, I don't know.
I mean, I'm saying that like people still use cash. What is that,
Well,
you know?
they try, if
My
you
dad
go
does.
to an arena, and my only experience at the moment is here in Buffalo at the stadium and the KeyBank Center, uh, you can't use cash. They don't
Mhm.
take it. You
Right.
and it can be frustrating. With the hockey team, I'm a season ticket holder, and I get a discount, and I remember holding up a line for, like, seemed endless, because I couldn't get the darn thing to function, because there was only a person kinda hanging around to see if there were problems, and everybody's out at the same time between periods or before the game, so, and there's you can't use cash.
Yeah. When reviewing an estimate, what should listeners be looking for?
Well, that's a great question, Leah. We obviously think the first thing they should look at is the BBB rating, and within that, you can look at their time in business. That's an issue. I think we've talked about that also in some other contexts, but. Uh, we would rate a company after 6 months in business, and they could have a B, B plus, and they have to be longer. I think they might be able to get an A minus, but you can't get an A plus until, I think, 3 years in business, and honestly, 6 months is probably not long enough, because somebody's just starts to function, they may not have had any experiences that they couldn't handle. And I think in a one of the previous segments we talked about, what's better, somebody who does a great job, or somebody who's good at their job, or somebody who's a really good business person, and you want both, but the longer they've been in business, the better. so that, and especially, um, we've talked about this, I know, in some other contexts, that see if they have complaints, and a complaint isn't a bad thing. That you should look to see what the complaint was, and then how they fixed it.
We don't wanna push out the people listening who are younger businesses though, right? I mean, if you're a
Right.
business just starting, I'm thinking of my son, he's, like, starting his own car detailing business, or he started it a couple years ago, but he wouldn't even be in the Better Business Bureau system. But for those who are and they're new, what do we as consumers need to know about hiring them? What do we look for?
Well, the first thing I would look for, and you're absolutely right, and we obviously we are willing to put our name on a business that's 6 months. So, I would absolutely use them, but I would look at the initial communications. Uh, were they quick? Were they thorough with their communication? Whether it was a quote, if you called them to ask for a quote, did they respond quickly? If they didn't answer the phones, now, a lot of our businesses, all the things we're talking about, are often very small. Your son's business is likely he's out detailing a car. He may not be able to answer the call when it comes through for for either a quote or setting up a date to do it. So, how quickly did he call back, and what was his manner? You
I've
know, they,
offered to be his secretary, he won't hire me, but I'm trying.
that's great.
Yeah.
I heard one thing that I loved, and I guess we've done a few of these. I think this is number 3. Speaking of the number 3, I love that the BBB does not give an A plus until you have 3 years of, is it experience, or is it 3 years with the BBB?
Time in business. We everything that we do with businesses is part of the algorithm for the letter grade, which we have no control over, is time in business. So that's the only time that it comes in. Otherwise, everything is treated absolutely the same, whether it's a single person doing car detailing, or someone doing, with a landscaper that we'll talk about another time, with 20 trucks and a host of employees. So, the time in business is obviously, people have to start, and we would give them credit if they worked for someone in a particular field. So if your son had worked for a car dealer doing the detailing, and then decided to start his own business, and he was actually doing the work, we would give him credit for that piece of it. That doesn't mean that we know what his business practices would be. So, that's where the 6 months has to be, before we would accredit them. But we would start a file. I was part of an interesting process yesterday for a totally unrelated. It was somebody that was doing some electrical work, I'll say, so I don't get too specific. One of our board members had an issue with somebody. They are like our staff, our board, are not allowed to ask for favors because of where they're engaged, and the company overbilled him for something. He called them, they credited it, they were great, and the board member said to the person on the phone, I'm on the board of the Better Business Bureau, and it's so refreshing that you did this, and so quickly and appropriately, and it had been probably the gatekeeper to an owner, and the owner called back 5 minutes later and said, "Why are you threatening me?" And it turned into, uh, the board member called me because he was afraid that this person was gonna call to complain about the Better Business Bureau. And now it was a new business. We had nothing on it. The board member had contracted with a former owner who had, in the process, sold the business to someone else. And there's more to it, and we won't take the time for this podcast for it. But it was a compliment that turned into a thing. It's
Right.
just hard to understand or believe.
Right, maybe so they didn't wanna feel like they were being watched or rated or something, but yeah,
Well, and frankly, if
misunderstanding, right?
somebody called me for that service, I wouldn't use the person who called up mad, about having gotten a compliment, because whatever it was, he clearly didn't understand, but he should have handled it in a more professional manner.
Right. So that brings me to this. What is a big takeaway from the Better Business Bureau from cases that you've seen that could help someone avoid a bad paving experience?
Well, I think, again, if something is too cheap, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. But what we would recommend, um, do your homework. Just talking to somebody earlier today that they always use reviews when they go on Amazon and they look at the Google and the Amazon reviews. And I said, those aren't always true. He kind of knew, but it hadn't stopped him from doing what he was doing before. So, absolutely use us. This situation with our board member. We're opening a file on the new company, and there's no complaints or anything, but our eyes are out, and that's how we find stuff. People call us, people email us, and that's how we get our information. And interestingly, I Googled the company, and there was nothing on the company except that they're actually a franchise, and we know that there's a headquarters someplace in Virginia. So at any rate, so look at the rating, look at the time in business, look at the communications. See how they're dealing. Again, brand new. Your son's starting this business. If he is a gentleman and respectful and courteous, hire him in a minute.
He is. He is, and I'm not just saying that.
I'm
So
sure, but and that's I'm really glad you brought that up with the new, because you don't new doesn't have to mean bad. It means you got to check, because you got to find out that you don't have 20 people you can call and say, who all will say, "Wow, great job."
And before we play a game that we want our listeners to play along with, I do want to ask you just to reiterate how people can use all of the services through the Better Business Bureau. You're online, you're easy to access, right?
Yes, very simple, bbb.org. And as soon as you put in an address or an email address or a phone number, it automatically geo finds who you are. So, if you're looking, you want to look up a specific company, that's how you would do it. But we have a toll-free a phone number from anywhere, actually in the country, 800-828-5000. We have about 24 hours a week of active open phone lines. We call back within 24 hours,
Real humans will
always.
be able to talk to real humans.
Real humans.
Wow.
We have our database. There are about
Huge.
134,000 businesses in upstate New York. We have reports on over 70,000 of them. And that 134,000 includes every attorney, every accountant, and so, we have great information. All of our information is free. So, people can check it online. You can't sleep at 3 in the morning. You can go in and check. If you want to find out more information, you call, and someone will absolutely walk you through as much information as we have. We do not recommend any specific product or service. The people will read a report in a monotone, and it doesn't matter if they pay us or not. In that regard,
Ready for the game, Warren?
I'm ready.
So, for our new listeners, we play a game at the end of every podcast called Hello, Goodbye. So, I'll read a statement, and Warren's going to say hello if it is accurate and explain why, and goodbye if it's not. All right. So, the first one is they say they have leftover material from another job and can give you a deal today. Is that a hello or goodbye?
It's an absolute goodbye. Tim, you can do the wah wah wah.
Wah, 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 bow.
Yeah, we just don't recommend. The caveat here is if you've seen them on the street doing two other jobs, and neighbors that have hired them, and that were to happen, maybe.
All right, so the next one is that they provide a clear breakdown of materials and prep work. Hello or goodbye.
Hello, that's what we That's what we want. That's you want people and the not just the breakdown, the clear breakdown. You get something that you understand, and if you don't, ask them to explain. Don't think that it'll figure itself out later because it often doesn't.
All right, they can start immediately, but they won't put anything in writing.
Oh, that's a very
Later.
quick goodbye.
Mhm.
Wah,
Um,
wah, 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 bow.
Slam the door.
Yeah, the writing part is absolutely critical. I suppose again a caveat is what you had, where you were standing there watching them and telling them what to do. But it absolutely, the communications, and that's a theme in everything that we'll talk about. It really is probably more critical than price, because it's whether you're really going to wind up getting anything of value for your hard-earned money. Just the fact that BBB has a ton of valuable information that read the complaint detail. Don't just see that they had a complaint. We have the back and forth once a complaint is closed, and all of our community services, our consumer facing services are all free.
And a third, right?
Yes, that would be what we would recommend. Again, sometimes paving, because it's often a day, they might be a half, where you pay half up front and half when it's done. But, and anything, I suppose, if we're doing a 1 day process. But yeah, we don't recommend paying 100% upfront.
Excellent.
I gotta say, as I continue to learn more and more, we've worked why I just really love everything the BBB does. I gotta compliment you and the team because
Thank you.
I like that you say, look at the complaints. I do think that is so vital for anything because if I see just great, So I love that you encourage that. So bravo to you. That is good news. That's going to be my
Yes.
good news of the day. That
It's
Well,
very
thank
good
you.
news.
We have an incredible team of people. Um, there's close to 40 people working here, or remote out in the communities, and they are well trained. The thing we demand is great communications. So,
Very important. Thank you so much, Warren Clark. We appreciate you taking time for this today and educating all of our listeners.
my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and we are really grateful for Hello Nation to help us get our information out.
Thank you. And from all of us here at Hello Nation, we want to thank all of you for tuning in. Please share this podcast. So much valuable information, especially for those looking to do a home improvement project like a paving. And we will see you soon.
Thanks for watching Hello Nation.